Hey everyone, alright, so let's talk about Annabelle, the prequel to James Wan's masterpiece from last year, The Conjuring. This was a good movie, and I had a good feeling about this movie from when it was first announced. Now, of course, James Wan isn't in the director's seat in this movie, he is producing it. And I can't remember the guy's name who's directing it, but he's the guy who was James Wan's director of photography on Insidious 2, A Dead Silence, and also The Conjuring. So he was kind of like a natural choice, sort of, to replace James Wan in the director's position. But even though James Wan isn't directing this movie, you can still tell that he was calling the shots, because this looks, feels, sounds like a James Wan movie. It is a James Wan movie. You know, he was involved in it. It looks like a James Wan movie. It feels like a James Wan movie. Therefore, it's a James Wan movie. It really is. But yeah, it is a good movie. It's not necessarily as like it isn't as good as The Conjuring. I'd say The Conjuring takes it, but I don't think it's trying to be. You know, with it being a prequel, it's building up to what happens in the next movie. You know, I think that's the thing with prequels. They're not necessarily trying to be as big as the movie that come before in the timeline. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of in keeping with the idea that it should get bigger and better with each one. So since Annabelle comes before The Conjuring, you know, and hopefully The Conjuring 2 will be bigger and better than what The Conjuring was. Because I think, by the looks of it, The Conjuring 2 is a pretty sure thing now. I know they had the problem with the lawsuit, and that was a very real problem. It was, but it looks as though things are going well for Warner Brothers, and it looks as though they're pushing on ahead with it. I think it's stated for a 23rd of October next year release for the US, 30th of October release over in the UK, or should I say here in the UK, for 2015. And apparently, well, Vera Farmiga in particular, she's looking forward, she's very excited about returning to the project. So I'm really looking forward to it, because of course Annabelle, it's already made, you know, it's already made a great deal in the way of profit, because I think it was a $6.5 million budget, minuscule, completely you know, by today's standards, it's very, very small. But yeah, that's one of the secrets to having a successful movie. First of all, it should be good, and second of all, keep the budget small, or as small as you can. But the interesting thing about James Wan's movies is, obviously, he specialises in low budget movies, because even The Conjuring, that was $20 million, one of the biggest budgets he's worked with, but still, by today's standards, it's not a great deal. What was Insidious? I think Insidious was around the $1.5 million mark. Again, very, very, very small. But when you look at what they did, I mean, when in Insidious, you know, going to the further, they don't need a great deal in the way of they don't need anything expensive for that, because it's all pitch black. You could have filmed that in a studio with the lights off and some dry ice. It was Insidious, that stuff in the further is the perfect example of less is more. But yeah, this most of James Wan's movies are low budget, but the great thing about the way he works is it never shows. You know, when you look at what his movies, you don't think that they are low budget, because it always looks good, and this is something that's continued in this movie. It looks good, and like in The Conjuring, because of course Conjuring was set in 1971. This movie is set in the back end of the 60s, a couple of years prior to the events of The Conjuring. But again, they've got the look right on. It looks good, you know, it looks as though it is the late 60s. So they did well to carry that on, because we've said before that sometimes when movies, you know, when movies are set in a specific period, sometimes they don't do the best job of recreating that period, and when they do a bad job of, you know, trying to create that particular period that they're trying to portray, it can really take you out of the movie, it can really spoil it. But obviously they've done it well here, they did it well in The Conjuring, and yeah, you've really got to love them for that. But yes, this movie, you may as well dive right in. Like I say, it's good. It starts pretty similar. It starts exactly how The Conjuring starts. Yeah, it does, because it opens up with that same scene. You know how The Conjuring starts with those three people who live in the flat on the couch talking to Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson about this Annabelle doll. It's the same scene here. Only the only difference is we don't see Patrick Wilson or Vera Farmiga, but Patrick Wilson has one line of dialogue in this movie off screen. Yeah, because obviously these three are telling Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga about what's been going on, you know, like, we don't know where, you know, we've never been so terrified. When you hear this, you're going to think we're nuts. We don't know where to start. You know, so all that, and then you off screen from Patrick Wilson. So how did you come to own the doll? And then that's when it goes into the main body of the movie. So like a couple of years previous to this meeting with the Warrens, and we're introduced to this this young couple who were living in California, John and Mia. Now they are a young couple, and they establish very early on, you know, they're the church-going people, newlyweds. John has just graduated from med school, and his wife Mia is expecting their first baby. So everything's going good. Now, they get home from church this particular day, and later on that night, they're getting sorted, and then John says to his wife Mia, "I've got a present for you," and brings this box in, because it's, as we see when we're in the house, his wife is a big lover of dolls. She collects dolls, and this big box comes in. He brings it in and opens it, and it's the Annabelle doll. And she says, "Oh, I can't believe you found it. We've been looking all over for this doll." So yeah, she's over the moon with it. It's basically, you know, a gift, I think, to celebrate their first kid, I think. You know, it's the one she's been looking for the longest time, and she's finally got it. She's happy. So later on that night, they all go to bed, everything's fine, and then during the middle of the night, the next door neighbours, they have a break-in, and it turns out that it's the next door neighbour's youngest daughter who ran away from home. She's back with who, by the looks of it, is her new boyfriend, and she's there to do her mother and father in. So Mia wakes up because she hears a scream from next door and wakes John up and says, "I think something's wrong next door, I just heard a scream." John goes over to investigate. Mia comes out the house with him. She's like stood, you know, she comes outside the house and she's stood on the path outside, and she's just waiting for John to come back. She's hoping he comes back. Now, this was really good because in a lesser movie, the amount of times we've seen this before, "Don't worry, calm down, I'll go and investigate, I'll be right back." In a lesser movie, the husband would have been bumped off straight away, because he wouldn't have come back, she'd have gone in, she'd have been done in too. No, John survives actually. Oh yeah, he bursts out of the house covered in blood. It's that scene we see from the trailer, you know, and May's like, "Oh, you're covered in blood," and then he says, "It's not mine, go in the house, call the police right now." So she does that, and anyway, she's calling the police, and we see in the background, Jesus Christ, the girl who's just done her mother and father in, she's in John and Mia's house now. Jesus Christ. She comes in with the Annabelle doll in her arms, and we get that scene from the trailer, you know, "I like your dolls." Mia drops the phone, as you probably would, and she says, you know, "Oh Jesus, my husband's going to be back in any second," and then the girl's boyfriend appears from out of nowhere behind Mia and just stabs her right in the side. Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, just grabs hold of her, bam, right in the side. And automatically thinking, Jesus Christ, what the hell's going to happen with the baby now? Because she's heavily pregnant at this point. She could go any day. Well, sorry, that's not true. Sorry, that's not true. She's heavily pregnant, but she's not as heavily pregnant as she is later on. Sorry, we're jumping a bit far ahead. But yeah, she gets stabbed. She's taken out of commission. She falls into a slump on the floor. She's not going anywhere. And then the girl's boyfriend is going to finish her off. Fortunately, John arrives. Last action hero comes charging in, takes this guy down. They both start fighting. Then the girl makes a grab for the knife to go and finish Mia off. John then takes her down. This poor guy is fighting off the world here, and he's doing quite a brilliant job too, actually, because he completely pawns this guy. Then he completely pawns his girlfriend. Why he's sorting her out, the boyfriend comes back round and he grabs I think it's a baseball bat that John had by the bed, grabs that and hits John, knocks him down, understandably so, and starts wailing away on him. Fortunately, the police then show up, kill the boyfriend outright there and then, so John's safe, thank God, because I feared the worst for him. I thought he was going to get killed off in the first 15 minutes. Fortunately, he doesn't, because he's quite a good character, actually. Yeah, then the girlfriend is obviously still alive, so she, still with the knife, just bails into the room with all these dolls in and barricades herself in. And anyway, by the time the police break the door down, she's laid there in a slump against the wall with the Annabelle doll on her lap, and she's done herself in, slit her throat from ear to ear, and we see that some of the blood from her throat drips down onto the doll. I think we see the scene in the trailer because it drips onto the doll and then goes into where the doll's eye socket is. Ooh, symbolic. Yeah. So then it cuts to a few weeks later, and now this is when the wife's heavily pregnant, just getting out of hospital, and they get back home, and the detective who is in charge of the case comes round to see them, and he informs them that the girl and her boyfriend she was indeed the daughter of the next door neighbours, and her and her boyfriend had joined a satanic cult group, and the killing of her parents was part of some sort of cult ritual. Yeah. But he says obviously, but he brushes it off in that typical style. You know, crazy people do crazy things. You know, the best thing you can do is move on and try to forget about it. And John and Mia agree to do just that. So the director leaves. The inspector leaves, and then obviously John and Mia are just planning to do what they can to forget the whole thing and move on with the rest of their life. But of course, it's not as simple as that. No, far from it. Because shortly after this, like the next day or so later, John needs to is informed that he needs to go away for 3 days on a business trip. Oh, yeah. So, but obviously, you know, Mia says, you know what, fine, you know, you do what you have to do. It's only 3 days. I'll be fine. And John goes, and then things start off fine, but then things start getting weird because Mia's at a sewing machine one day. It's established early on. She's a big fan of a sewing machine, and then from the doll's room, she hears what sounds like the rocking chair going back and forth, and she gets up, she walks over to the room, and as she gets to the door and starts to open it, the sound suddenly stops. She opens the door, and the Annabelle doll is sat there in the rocking chair. She didn't put it there, she put it on the shelf, so we don't know how the hell this thing's got there. And then she does something which is actually quite realistic. She just freezes for a while, looks at the doll, and looks at the chair, and she just basically, no, I'm not doing it. Just leaves the room, closes the door behind her. Yeah, don't get involved. And then I think it's either later that day or the following day. She's at a sewing machine again, and there's this pan of popcorn. Yeah, because obviously this is the back end of the 60s, you know, microwaves weren't that commonplace back then. Yes, understatement. So yeah, good old making popcorn the good old fashioned way. So I had this pan of popcorn with all the tin foil wrapped around it on one of the hobs in the kitchen, and then suddenly all the hobs switch on by themselves, or we think it's by themselves, and you know, this pan's getting hotter and hotter, and you know, it's this tin foil's getting bigger, you know, a big dome emerging underneath this tin foil, and then obviously bursts, fire breaks out in the kitchen. Mia stops at the sewing machine because she smells burning, as you probably would, goes into the kitchen to investigate. Oh Jesus Christ, the whole kitchen's ablaze. She tries to make a run for it, trips over the leg of this table, you know, a bit cliched, I know, but just go with it. And anyway, yeah, she's trying to get back to her feet to get out of the house, and then suddenly, in a very similar vein to what happens in The Conjuring, an invisible force seems to grab hold of her leg and yank her back towards the kitchen. You know, kind of like that scene where one of the parent kids are in the bed and ghost yanks halfway down the bed. Similar sort of thing here. Invisible force yanks Mia by the leg along the floor back towards the kitchen, and then obviously Mia's really spooked by this. You know, what the hell is this? fortunately, the neighbours burst in at that moment to rescue her and take her outside and, rescue her from the flames. And I think the fire department get there pretty soon afterwards and put the fire out. And I think it's at that time she actually goes into labour. Yeah, and then also obviously it cuts to her in hospital following the birth, and John finally makes it back from his business trip and arrives at the hospital. He meets his kid. He's over the moon, and then Mia says, "Oh, I'm pleased. You're so happy. I'm happy too. But listen, before we forget what's just happened, there is something seriously wrong with that house. I can't go back there. We need to leave." And again, in the true James Wan fashion, that's exactly what happens. Yeah, John says, "You don't want to go back? Fair enough. You don't have to." They move to like an apartment block. And while they're moving, Mia tells John, there's something wrong with that doll, the Annabelle doll. I need you to get rid of it. He says, absolutely fine. Obviously, he doesn't realise, what's going on. He thinks it's just his wife's, still spooked after what happened that night with the murders that took place. So he's fine. He's been supportive. He's been understanding. You don't want the doll anymore because that crazy girl, she had it and she killed herself. I can understand you don't want it. That's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll get rid of it. Chucks it in the bin. They move. They're unpacking, and when they're unpacking the second box of dolls, boom! There is the Annabelle doll right there at the bottom of the box. The husband's like, "What the? How the hell did that get in there?" But for some reason, when the wife sees it, she has this sudden change of heart and says, "Do you know what? You're right. We should try to move on and forget the past. It's just a doll. Let's keep it." So, they've moved. Great decision, but it's not going to matter because they've still brought that damn thing with them. So, it's not going to matter either way. But yeah, much like in the same vein to Insidious, things get worse after they've moved. Yeah, things weren't good before, but things get a lot worse after they move. Things don't, the problem doesn't go away. Complete opposite, because it's only after they move that we start to get the manifestations. And Jesus Christ, do we get manifestations? Like we get that scene one night, where we see it in the trailer, where Mia goes into a room, looks back across the hallway into the other room. There's that kid stood there. The door starts to close. She runs at the door. Door swings open. It's not a kid anymore. It's the full-grown, woman who killed herself with the Annabelle and had killed herself while with the Annabelle doll on her lap, because that's what it is. It's the ghost of the girl who committed suicide in Mia and John's old home, and of course the little kid that we saw was that girl when she was a kid. Yeah. So, I honestly, that is one of the best scares of the movie. That scene where the kid runs at the door, bursts through, and then there's the full-grown woman there. It's very much akin to that scene in Insidious where Rose burns asleep, and then the long-haired demon in the leather trench coat, comes straight through the wall into the bedroom and charges full speed ahead at her. And it's very much akin to that scene in The Conjuring, where the witch is on top of the wardrobe and just like, pounces on one of the parent kids. Yeah, but again, we talk about that. You know, it's a shame that was given away in the trailer. But like I say, The Conjuring wasn't much better, you know, in terms of giving stuff away in the trailer. Because like I say, it had that scene where the witch jumps off the wardrobe in the trailer. It had the scene where Lily Taylor got locked in the basement, and then obviously the hand clap behind her. That was in the trailer. So yeah, you know, Annabelle wasn't much worse than The Conjuring in that respect. But yeah, I mean, like I say, it had some of the film's best scares in the trailer for the movie, but it still had a whole lot, you know, Annabelle, much like The Conjuring, it still had a lot of good scares that it didn't show in the actual film itself. So it wasn't as if the trailer spoiled the movie. Because like I say, we talk about the manifestation of the demon who this cult was worshipping, and who turns out to be the thing that actually is in control of the doll. You know, this demon is terrifying, but like I say, not shown at all in the trailer, you know. So that was a good decision, because I think, if I remember rightly, in the Insidious trailer, they showed the red-faced demon in the trailer for that, whereas obviously in the trailer for Annabelle they didn't show the demon at all, which was a good decision. Incidentally, the demon in this movie is played by Joseph Bashara, who does of course the music score, and of course played the red-faced demon in Insidious, and played the Bathsheba witch in The Conjuring. So that was a nice little James Wan touch, having Joseph Bashara as the demon of the piece again. Yeah, it was a nice little touch. So yes, it's after they've moved where things really pick up and things really get frightening. And again, much in much of the same vein to Insidious, it's the poor wife that goes through it the most in the movie. You know, poor Rose Byrne, she has a hell of a time in those two Insidious movies. In this movie, Mia, she gets the brunt of it throughout this movie. Like I say, she sees the apparition of a ghost charging full speed ahead of her. She goes down to the basement of the apartment complex one night to get something, and she gets chased up the stairwell back to her room by the demon. That's a horrific scene. We've got to talk about that. The elevator scene. I had no idea, although I had heard about it rather ambiguously in the Brad Jones review. Because he was talking about, the stuff in the elevator is pretty well done, but it didn't go much beyond that, because I was thinking, the stuff in the elevator, I don't know what to expect from that. But like I say, as soon, I knew it was coming as soon as she stepped foot into that elevator, but I didn't know what to expect. I just knew, something's going to go down here, and something certainly does go down. Jesus Christ. Because while she goes into the basement, what happens is, she hears this baby crying, and this pram gets pushed from, there's like, further down into the basement, there's this doorway, like with, those plastic divide sheets, covering it, and then this pram just gets pushed through, and you can hear a baby crying inside it, and naturally Mia goes over to investigate, and there's this there's this blanket in the pram, and it's covered in blood, and she picks the blanket up to look underneath. There's nothing there, and then suddenly this black hand just grabs her forearm, and she, what the hell is this? And it's that goddamn demon. Yeah, that goddamn demon. And she races back to the lift, and she's, spamming the button to get back to her floor, and the door's closed. You think, she's safe. No, suddenly it keeps opening. The elevator isn't moving. it keeps opening up on the basement floor, and she does it about 3 or 4 times. She's not getting anywhere, and it's really atmospheric because you know, the cellar, the basement, all the lights go out in the basement. She's just got a torch. She can hardly see a damn thing, and you don't need me to tell you guys that blackness, dark spaces are very frightening places to be. A dark space is, of course, a threatening space because you don't know what's 1 foot in front of you, you know. And even with the, you know, it's a small torch, you know. It's not you know, you're only gonna see sections, whatever you point the torch at. You're not going to see what's over there. You're not going to see what's behind you, you know. And obviously, could you say the radius? The reach of the torch, you know, it's not all that great. So you're not going to see what's at the end of the damn corridor, you know. But yeah, dark spaces, you're only ever going to see partial images. It's a very, you know, you see it in The Conjuring, that night where the kid gets woke up by by the ghost pulling her leg, and when she sits up and he says, you know, there's someone standing behind the door, and the older sister gets up and walks over there to investigate. You know, we don't see anything. We just see the older sister stood there by the door saying, you know, there's no one here. And then obviously the younger sister reacts saying, oh God, it's standing right behind you. We don't see anything, but we are still creeped out because it's completely pitch black behind that door. So it's almost as if that there is someone there, because for all we know there could be, you know. Yeah, again, it's that prime example of it's what you don't see. Yeah, and it's much the same here down in that basement. But yeah, so she eventually realises, I'm not getting anywhere in this elevator, and she just goes full belt through the exit door into the stairwell, races up the stairs, and she gets halfway up, drops the torch, you know, she stumbles, drops the torch, and picks it back up, and then as she does, looks over the banister to see what's going on a few levels below her, and then obviously there's this demon coming up the stairs, true Freddy Krueger fashion as well, because it's got those same claws. It's scraping its claws along the banister, thinking, Jesus Christ, have I just stepped into Dream Warriors here? You know, are we in Freddy's boiler room? For Christ's sake. Yeah, very horrific stuff. Yeah. Yeah, that demon is something to see. But again, brilliant that they didn't put it in the trailer, because that really would have spoilt it if they did. Yeah, but yeah, so that is he's the main villain of the piece, essentially, this demon who this cult worshipped. And he's the one who's been manipulating the doll, and we find that out eventually. You know, we see him actually pick the doll up and move it, because that's the thing. If you look at the report of the Annabelle case, the Annabelle doll itself never became animated. It wasn't it because I know Brad Jones touched on this, that he was, you know, there was always that worry that it was this movie going to get into child's play territory with Chucky, and that would have been a big mistake, because that's not how it was reported, you know. Yeah, like I say, props to the movie. It never did that. It never did that, thankfully. Yeah, because from what my understanding of it was, obviously this, you know, the spirit moved the doll and manipulated it, teleported it around to various points in the house, or in the case of the later owners of the doll, their apartment, you know, to give the impression that it was becoming animated. But yeah, it never was. It was this demon or spirit actually manipulating the doll. You know, it wasn't if the doll came to life, got up and walked around. Like, it wasn't as if the doll became animated, got itself down from that shelf in the room and got itself up on the rocking chair. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm glad they never tried to turn it into a child's play type thing, because that really would have, you know, fair enough if you weren't someone who was familiar with familiar with the case. Sorry, I don't profess to be. I only know. I've only had a brief look at it. Sorry, I don't claim to be an expert, but you know, it it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. But yeah, we eventually see that this demon is the one that's been manipulating this doll all along, and we find out that because Mia and John eventually decide, you know, there is something going on here, we need help. So they go to their priest, and also they befriend the woman of the local bookstore, who turns out to know quite a bit about this sort of thing too. So they're the two people to go to for help, and they find out that the reason they've been afflicted by this demon is because it wants a sacrifice. It wants a soul to be sacrificed to him, and we find out that he's actually after Mia and John's the soul of Mia and John's newborn baby, their daughter Leah. That's the soul this demon's after. And then the priest says, the thing is, a demon can only take a soul if it's offered. That's what he says. A demon can only take a soul if it's offered to him. The hell of it is, a baby can't offer its soul. So then the mother realizes, Mia realizes, oh God, that means one of us has to offer our souls in the baby's place. You know, and like I say, things get worse. At one point, the priest actually tries to help them out and says, "Do you know what? I'll take the doll. I'll try and get it to, you know, if I can get it to the church, someplace holy, someplace sacred, it might weaken the grip that this demon has over the doll, and it might, you know, this whole problem might go away." He tries, nearly gets himself killed in the process. So yeah, it all comes to a head one particular night where the baby actually disappears. It disappears, and we find out that this demon has essentially kidnapped this baby. And he said, and the thing, the mother goes into the baby's room, and written all over the walls is, you know, her soul, because Mia, the mother, loses it eventually, as you probably would in this sort of situation, and just flat out screams, "What the hell do you want from us?" And yeah, her soul. Yeah, basically that the way it's all wrought across the walls and the ceiling it's very much like that scene at the beginning of The Conjuring, you know, where the young girls in their apartment go into the room, and obviously all written all over the wall is the "Miss Me" that Annabelle's wrote in that crayon. It's the exact same crayon. Yeah. Wow. And again, it's nice little touches like that, you know, that make these movies, like, if you were to watch Annabelle and then watch The Conjuring, it'd link up really, really well. yeah, you can tell efforts being made to maintain continuity. So the mother is, sorry, I keep changing. Mia is the mother, of course. She's at breaking point now, and she says, "Look, there is no way you are taking my daughter's soul. But is there any other way?" And then the windows, the windows uh, suddenly writing emerges on them. It says, "Your soul." Oh, and then the windows open. As if, you know, you throw yourself out that window, you give me your soul, you can have your daughter back. So obviously, Mia realizes, right, I'm going to have to do what I'm going to have to do. Fortunately, at that moment, John and I think Evelyn, she's called, who, the owner of the bookstore, they're burst in, and Mia's stood with holding the Annabelle doll by the window, about to chuck herself out, and they say, "No, don't do it." And she says, "I've got to. It's the only way to save our daughter." And then Evelyn decides, "Look, you've got a lot to live for. You've got to be here for your daughter. I have nothing to live for," because we find out that she'd lost her daughter a few years previous, and she says, "Let me go, let me do it. I've got nothing to live for." And she's as this movie's gone on, she's really gotten close to Mia and her daughter. She's became a really good friend. So she's, she wants to do this for him. It's like she's doing it for herself, she's doing it for them. So yes, she ultimately sacrifices herself in Mia's place. Like, she takes the doll and she throws herself out the window, and it's very much like the end of The Exorcist. When the priest invites the demonic spirit to go into him, then dives straight through the window and kills himself. It's very much like that. So, no sooner does she do that, he jumps to her death, then the babies return to them. Basically, they suddenly hear crying from the next room, race in there, and the baby's there, and it hasn't been harmed. So it's like the curse has been lifted, if you can say that. If you can say that. The curse has been lifted, they've got the daughter back, it looks as though they're safe. Then things get really eerie, because when we see outside, obviously there's Evelyn's dead body there, but the doll is nowhere to be found. And then it cuts to 6 months later, and we see Mia and John and their daughter Leah leaving church, and it looks as though life's gone back to normal for them now. They're no longer afflicted, and they're talking to the priest, and he's asking how he's fully recovered from his experience, and he's asking how everything's going, and say, "Oh yeah, everything's fine." And he even says, "Have you seen any sign of the doll since that night?" He said, "No, not at all." And then that's the last we see of those, because it then cuts to this antique store where we see that the goddamn Annabelle doll is sitting there on the shelf. And then this elderly woman comes in and spies the doll and says, "Oh, it's just the one I've been looking for. It's for my daughter. She's a nurse, and she's recently just bought her first apartment. It'll be a lovely housewarming gift for her. She loves dolls." And so it's all leading into the beginning of The Conjuring, because of course she buys the doll for her daughter, and then that's where things take a turn for the worse for her daughter, and she becomes afflicted. Obviously, Evelyn's sacrifice was in vain. It didn't work, because this doll is still being haunted by this demonic spirit. And so, of course, it'll lead into the beginning of The Conjuring, where these three young nurses living in this flat have been afflicted and have called the Warrens in to come and help them out. So yeah, that's pretty much the ending of the movie. The final shot of the movie is actually in the Warrens' basement. So it's kind of like, it's basically after the Warrens have came in and took the doll, because they're in the Warrens' basement, and the Annabelle doll is sat in that glass case, and it's the camera's panning through the Warrens' basement, and it's coming up for a close-up on of the doll in the glass case, you know, with the sign warning, positively do not open. And then we get a little bit of text that comes up on the screen, says, you know, the Annabelle doll now resides in the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, and it's locked securely in this special glass box, and it's blessed by a priest twice a month. And very similar to how at the end of The Conjuring it has the close-up on the music box. We have this close-up of the Annabelle doll in the glass cabinet, and how in The Conjuring we were waiting for the music box to stop playing, and we were expecting, oh Jesus, are we going to get a stupid jump scare as a final stinger to the end of the movie? You get that kind of same feeling here, because it's lingering on the doll, thinking, oh Jesus, please don't let something jump out. Please don't do that to us, movie. You've been really good and really, you've been really, you know, a really intelligent horror movie so far, and you've done a lot of great job in the way of mood and atmosphere, and you've got some really decent scares down. So please don't spoil it by doing some stupid stinger at the end. And in exactly the same way in The Conjuring that they didn't do it here. Thank God for that, because that would have really turned me off this movie, because obviously it's exactly the same thing as The Conjuring. How The Conjuring held on the music box until the music stopped playing, then just cut to black. Same thing happened here. Just held on the Annabelle doll, and then boom, cut to black, credits. That's how it's done. And that was my reaction when I was sat in the theatre, because I was on the edge of my seat playing, please don't do it, please don't do it. Boom, cut to black. Yes, that's how it's done. Because honestly, when a movie throws in a stupid jump scare at the end, that can really, right, that's it. I don't like this movie anymore. Because it was the same thing with that movie Sinister, you know, the Ethan Hawke movie. That was a decent movie. Yeah, it was good. It was a really creepy movie, has some genuinely creepy imagery in it, really good mood, atmosphere, you know, really had actually some intelligent thought behind it, you know. It wasn't something that was thrown together on the cheap to make money. It was something that a lot of that thought, time and effort had gone into it. But then that goddamn ending with Mr. Buggy just because obviously we cut to in the attic, you've got that box of film reel in the centre of the attic, and then this camera is panning out, and then Mr. Buggy just like flings himself on the floor right in front of the camera, boom, stares at the camera, cut to credits, like, god damn it, movie. No, but like I say, this movie doesn't do that. Neither does The Conjuring, and you've got to love that, and you've got to love those two movies for that, because, like I say, a lesser movie, i.e., Sinister, would have done a stupid jump scare at the end. Yeah, but like I say, thank God it didn't do it, because it would have been such a shame. Because it was such a shame when it happened in Sinister. It really, really was. But never mind. But I was so glad they didn't do it in this. It would have been really annoying if they did. But again, just goes to show, even though James Wan wasn't directing this one, he was still calling the shots, and it's to be expected, because James Wan, for one, again, because it obviously, Annabelle was another Warner Brothers production, like The Conjuring was. James Wan made a hell of a lot of money for Warner Brothers with The Conjuring. He took a movie and made a movie on a $20 million budget, and in the USA alone made more than $100 million. So obviously, Warner Brothers would have just been like, look, I know James Wan isn't directing this, he's producing it, but anything he wants, anything he needs, any suggestions he makes, just give him what he wants, because he may give us this smash hit for $20 million, made more than $100 million in the USA alone. This guy is a gold mine, alright? Give him what he wants. Do as he says, alright? And like I say, since the guy directing this had worked with James Wan for a number of years previously, he'd have been, like I say, he knows how James Wan operates now, so he'd have known, So, like, again, comes back to what I said about him being a natural choice to replace James Wan. Yeah, but a really good movie. Really, really good movie. But this is the interesting thing. This movie wasn't what I thought it was going to be, because I thought that it was going to be the events of those nurses living in the apartment. I thought it was going to be what happened with them leading up to those calling Ed and Lorraine Warren. Because I thought that was how it was going to end. Like, we need help. We've got to call these guys, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Alright, I've seen enough. Let's call Patrick Wilson. But no, that wasn't it. This is kind of like the origin story. What happened even prior to that. Yeah. So with that, I don't know how much this movie is, how supposedly based on truth this movie is, because of course with The Conjuring it was based on the Warrens case files, and of course what we saw of the Annabelle case in The Conjuring was based on the Warrens case files. But this quote unquote origin story, which took place prior to this nurse coming in ownership of the doll being afflicted and calling the Warrens in, obviously the Warrens wouldn't have had anything to do with that. They wouldn't have made any documentation of it, so they wouldn't have had any records like that to go by. So this movie wouldn't have been based on the Warrens case files. So as good as entertaining as the movie was, and it was entertaining, it was enjoyable, it was good, it was well thought out. I do not know how much it is supposedly based on truth, but hey, it's a movie, it's a good movie, it's a well-made movie, and plenty of thought, plenty of effort has gone into this. Again, it's low budget, but it's not something that's been thrown together to make money. You can tell this is something of a passion project. You can tell everyone on this movie wanted to bring their A game, wanted to make the best movie possible, and it shows, and you've got to admire the makers of the movie for that. They've done a fantastic job. They really have. And again, one of the reasons why this movie's already become such a smash hit. You know, it's a good movie to begin with, and like I say, they kept the budget small, and no wonder it's made as much as it has already. But yeah, final thoughts. Go see it. You won't be disappointed. And like I say, if you're planning on getting this movie and watching it back to back with The Conjuring, you'll have no problem, because like I say, the link up so well. They really, really do. You'll be able to watch Annabelle, then take that out and put The Conjuring straight in the machine, and like I say, you'll be right there with it. You know. They link up brilliantly well, and obviously I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've kept James Wan involved, and they've used his director of photography to man the production, you know, because like I say, he was the guy directing was the DP on The Conjuring, so obviously you know everything is going to be, it's going to look the same, it's going to feel the same, and like I say, with James Wan supervising, you know, it's going to be it's going to be top quality. It's going to be the best it can be. But again, much like The Conjuring, it's a good throwback movie. It really is. Of course, we've mentioned Joseph Bashara doing the music score again. Does a fantastic job, as always. The music score in this is really interesting, because, you know, when you look at his score for Insidious and his score for The Conjuring, they are quite different, because obviously, The Conjuring was much more full orchestra and used a choir of voices, whereas Insidious was very much like stringed instruments. You know, we had that trademark screech of the stringed instruments. You know, that really piercing sound. The great thing about this movie is it actually borrowed from both the music score for Insidious and the music score for The Conjuring, actually mixed them in with each other. So, and that was really nice. It really, really worked. Joseph Bashara did a really, really good job here. Again, another great point about the movie, it's got a really good music score, as The Conjuring did and as Insidious did. In terms of how this movie would rank in terms of the James Wan horror movies, the way I'd rank them is, I would put Insidious, Insidious 2 and The Conjuring at the top, and then I'd be more inclined to put this one, Saw and Dead Silence in like secondary. Excuse me. But still good movie, still a decent movie. You know, if you haven't really seen many of James Wan's movies, you know, like if you didn't get round to seeing The Conjuring, or if you haven't gotten round to seeing Insidious, and you're looking for a horror movie to check out, this would be a decent starting point. You know, I'm looking forward until this hits, for when this hits Blu-ray, and I'm looking forward for when The Conjuring 2 comes out, because like I say, I'm so psyched for that movie now. I hope James Wan is going to come back and direct that one, because obviously he's finished with Fast 7 now, so I know he's trying to get to branch into other areas aside from horror, but it would be nice to see him come back and do The Conjuring 2, because I know he's going to be involved with it, you know, probably as a producer again, and that's fine, but it'd be nice to see him come back and direct this one. It really would. You know, like if this was his, like, you know, if this was his final one, because I know he said that Insidious 2 was going to be one of his final ones. If he decided to come back on the condition that this would be his final horror movie that he directs, I would be fine with that. But it would be nice for him to come back and direct The Conjuring 2. Yeah, that would be good. But yeah, I'm looking forward for that one to come out on Blu-ray, because I'd like to do a marathon of all of them. You know, like from Saw, like Saw, Dead Silence, Insidious, Insidious 2, Annabelle, The Conjuring, and The Conjuring 2. It'd be great. Yeah, and like I say, I'm looking forward to being able to do that. It'll be really good. Yeah. So yes, that brings this to a close. I do recommend the movie. If you're thinking about going to see it, you won't be disappointed. And if you have seen it already, or if you, I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope you agreed with some of the points that I've made. And like I say, if you're gonna go see it, I hope you enjoy it and have a good time. But yes, so that's it. That's my final words on it. Definitely worth seeing, more than worth seeing. Yeah, it's a good movie, really well made and really well thought out. You can tell there's been plenty of effort, and it's been a labour of love for the people involved, I think. Yeah, not a cash grab, not at all. And yeah, go see it to support R-rated horror movies, because it is of course R-rated. Yeah, go support the R-rated horror movie, because as we've said before, R-rated movies are becoming kind of a lost art. So yeah, yeah, if you go see it, I hope you enjoy it. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for sticking with me through this review. Sorry it's been a bit all over the place as my reviews so often are, but again, as always, when you see the movie, this'll all make sense. But yes, thanks for sticking with me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you everyone.